I'm Nicole Casperson, Fintech journalist, and this is What the Fintech. As a journalist who has covered the finance sector over the last 5 years, I've had the opportunity to interview and engage with some of the best minds in the space. The media landscape is changing, and financial services is grabbing the attention of a more diversified audience than ever before. As a member of that growing demographic, I will provide direct access to the inner workings of a complex industry while bringing an unconventional perspective to news coverage. Leaving big bank earning reports to the boring traditional media firms, I'll focus on the tech-savvy apps, digital investing platforms, challenger banks, and payment giants to drive relevant content that looks forward to disruption instead of fearing it. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of What the Fintech, a podcast for fintech professionals who want to shape the future of our industry with innovation and inclusion. I'm your host, Nicole Casperson, and today I'm joined by Jackie Shoback, co-founder and managing director at 1414 Ventures, a venture capital firm investing in early-stage startups that are building the next generation of digital identity technology. As for Jackie, she's a 25-year C-suite leader with experience launching, scaling, and running businesses that go from startup to billion-dollar companies in revenue at firms like Staples, Fidelity, and TIAA. Basically, she's a total badass, and I'm excited to talk investing in digital identity infrastructure, wealth management, and female leadership with her. Jackie, welcome to What the Fintech.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I love being called a badass. It's not the first time, and I'm also hoping it's not the last.
I recently had someone on Twitter refer to what I do or myself as like badassery, and that was a new term for me, and so I got to add it to my resume, add it to my bio. But yeah, no, so happy that you are here with me. Tell me, where are you working from today?
Oh, well, I'm in my home office just outside of Boston. I'm going to apologize in advance. I've got a dog downstairs and some kids around the house. So if you hear a little bit of mayhem, it's just a normal day, a normal day in my house.
Right. Just an average day. Same. My cat has made a few appearances on my podcast already. So who knows? She may come in but you know, either way, we're human, and that is kind of the interesting aspects of working from home. But yeah, so to dive right in, your background is wildly impressive, as I said in my intro, from Harvard Business School to your decades-long career, scaling businesses we all know. I always like kicking off these convos with your values. What are the set of values that have been that common thread to keep you grounded throughout your successful career?
Well, Nicole, you know, it's so interesting. I have to say a lot of it actually goes back to growing up. And I'm the youngest of 7. So I just want to mention that because that really was very formative in, you know, my values and my approach to life and to business. I grew up with a very strong work ethic and strong set of core values. And I would say that really the few that are kind of at the crux of who I am, and I have these little sayings as a result of these values. So the first one I would say is, you know, there are no shortcuts in life, like at least for 99% of us. So you have to work hard to achieve your goals. I tell my kids that all the time. The second thing is people matter above all things, respect and trust. You have to treat people with respect. Trust is earned, but once earned, you need to respect it. I also believe very much in being a lifelong learner. Curiosity is key. And I think, you know, it's being curious is actually the key to success in a lot of ways, because you're constantly thinking of the ways that you can do things better, that you can make things more impactful. And that's a great thing. This is squarely being flexible, squarely being the 7th in the family. I had to be flexible. Depending upon what was going on, I had to be flexible. And, you know, in business, I'd say that flexibility is just rolling with the punches. Sometimes you have to lead. Sometimes you have to follow. Sometimes you have to just figure out, you know, how to make lemonade out of lemons. And that's a big part of life. And then finally, life is short. what goes around comes around. I'm a big believer in that saying, what goes around comes around. And if you do the right thing, your personal brand will develop a halo, and that will be priceless in terms of its impact and what it will do for you.
Such amazing values and so well articulated. I think those are key points that any fintech operator, VC, or anyone in this space, anyone in business can take away and think to themselves, how do I apply these to my own leadership, my own business, whatever it is. And something that's just so important is kind of taking those past experiences that you've had and those lessons learned, and how do you bring that into your future in fintech, in investing, in whatever it is. And so I love that you apply all of those lessons learned, especially with, it's not all the time that you meet someone that is like one of 7 children. What a wild journey.
That's for sure. Let me tell you.
What a wild journey.
It was not easy. 4 sisters and 2 brothers.
Woo.
Believe me, it was.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. But what that does is, I think the curiosity aspect as well, and flexibility that you have to have when you have that many siblings. I have 2 older brothers, but there's only 3 of us, not 7, but, it does come with having to learn how to share things, or having to learn how to mend yourself to other circumstances that don't always revolve around you. And I think a lot of leaders could take that away for sure. And it does kind of tie right into you leaving big corporate America to focus on investing in startups to pay it forward for that next generation of innovative companies. Talk to us through that decision and why it was so critical to you.
I'm so glad you're asking that question, because it's so interesting, right? A lot of people are scared, I think, to take chances and to take risks. I definitely take what I'd sort of call calculated risks. Like, my life has always been about these calculated risks. And for me, stepping away from corporate America and, jumping into the deep end of the pool, not only with startups, but with a startup venture capital firm. I always joke with people, I'm a startup funding startups. So it's really kind of the tip of the spear in a way. But for really me, it boils down to 3 things: opportunity, impact, and timing. And that's at least the framework and the lens I sort of think about things. So for me personally, I love challenges. I love trying new things. In my previous 25 years of experience, I moved around a lot. That was really driven by my desire to constantly try something new, to take on a challenge, and, to really kind of be put to the test, if you will. My early days at Staples, ever since I worked for Tom Stemberg, the founder, I was very fortunate that he was my first boss there, and I worked for him, and, he was a mentor. I sort of joke, I've been a closet entrepreneur since those early days. And I knew that I wanted to do something on my own at some point, but it had to be the right thing and it had to be the right time. Mm-hmm. So why is that? Well, for me, when making a decision like that, you kind of have to take your whole situation into account. And by the whole situation, I mean, the last 20 years, my husband was or is a serial entrepreneur. And we have 2 kids. Our kids are now 15 and 18. But over the course of that time, it never seemed like the right time for both of us to be in the deep end of the pool and trying to, take on all of that risk. However, back in 2019, when my partner and I first got this idea, really was my partner's idea, and I kind of worked with him to validate it. But when we got that idea, it really boiled down to, where was I in my life? Well, my kids were bigger, 15 and 18. My husband's business had actually grown to be a stable, bigger. It's still a startup, but still much more stable and much more, less risky. And so with that piece of the equation settled, I looked at the opportunity, the digital identity market. I looked at venture. I looked at what we were thinking of doing. And I said, wow, the team we can put together, the sector and the investment thesis, they all resonated. They all got validated. And then finally, I would say one thing about me, I don't know if this comes with age, or I don't know if this is part of one's DNA, but I'm a very introspective person. Maybe that does come with age. I reflect a lot, when I go out to run 3 miles, or usually when I'm doing that or in the shower, I think a lot. And one of the things that I thought about was, you know what? I don't want to look back and have any regrets. It's very important to me that I, when I look back on my career, I don't want to say what could have been or what if. And that was kind of one of those what if kind of moments. And so that was my calculus.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so much in there that I think is critical. You evaluated your personal life first before jumping into a new business. And I think that's something that we're seeing as we are all navigating the pandemic and our new normals is how do you, first put your personal life at the top of your priority list, as opposed to, nope, I'm just going to do this business thing just because, or I'm just going to grab, onto this thing. But saying, hey, let me reflect and think, okay, my kids are in a good place. My family's in a good place. Now is the time. My home is in a good place.
Exactly.
And not a lot of people, I feel like, take the time to do that, or maybe just now taking the time to do that. Hence, the great resignation and great reshuffle. So
that's right.
I mean, what an important thing to do. And then also just we have it in common being super introspective, because I am the same way. It's kind of what I love about cardio or working out. I love having just this moment where it's just me and my mind and no one else bothering me, to be able to say, to really think things through, sometimes to a fault, but for the most part, it's a good thing. Right. And yeah, maybe I'll get better at it.
I completely agree. And I have to thank you, Nicole. Family first. I guess that's a new value I need to add to the list.
Exactly.
It's kind of implicit, but you're right. It kind of was first on the list. And, you have to put everything in perspective. And also, I have to tell you one other funny little story. I was talking to a good friend from business school, who's also an investor in my fund, by the way. And I was telling him about, some opportunity I had many years ago to work at, I'm not going to say the name of the company, but it's one of the top few companies now in the world. We'll leave it at that. And he said, Jackie, you know what? Gosh, we all have stories like that, right? I mean, you wouldn't be successful if you didn't have, those opportunities that came. But honestly, it wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right situation. So it really is timing is everything, I think. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, thinking of, I think the timing of what happened in your career when it comes to Staples and helping the company grow to more than $1 billion in sales. Will you talk to us through the importance of those niche markets and the evolution of that from your time at Staples to today, when there are way more companies catering or kind of going after those niche groups?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. So, so it's interesting. So I joined Staples. It was actually the summer in between my first and second year of business school. I had been an investment banker before that, and I really wanted to do something different. I wanted to be in an operating environment. And at the time, I hadn't even heard of Staples. They had just IPO'd. And there was this opportunity to work for the founder and the CEO, Tom Stemberg, as basically his strategy assistant. So it was putting together the 5-year plan and figuring out the growth trajectory. And I got there. And you know how in life, it's so important that you know what you don't like as much as you also confirm what you do like. Well, I got there and just putting together this plan and, seeing the opportunity in the market, I was so energized by it. I remember coming home and telling my boyfriend, who's now my husband, wow, these guys set goals and they actually do what they say they're going to do. That's amazing, right? You think it's so simple, but yet it was so impactful. So I joined full time, and I was very fortunate. One of the first opportunities I got to do several years, into it, was launch Staples.com.
Wow.
Just for a little bit of context, I joined Staples when we were 400 million in revenue. And over the 10 years, we grew it to 15 billion.
Wow.
Staples.com was nothing. We wrote the business plan and we launched it, and we grew it to $1 billion in revenue within 3 years.
Wow.
It was the craziest thing. It was very chaotic, but I absolutely loved it. And, I was reflecting back thinking that was like crazy back then, 1999 or 2000, whatever the year was. And actually, even by today's standards, to have that kind of growth trajectory, I think is still pretty amazing. I don't think that many can actually grow that quickly. And we did it with a lot of barriers. And so I guess to your point, niche markets back then, like e-commerce, now we would really call that an emerging market. And by emerging, what I mean is it's the early days, in many ways, kind of like digital identity. It's the early days, but there's an opportunity for this to become transformative and truly huge and pervasive. And I would say that, back then, it really was such a different world. There were so many more barriers.
Yeah.
Think about it. Back then, we were in Web 1.0. There was no cloud. There was no Wi-Fi. There was no AI. There was no mobile.
A world a lot of us don't even know. Like, when did that world
a lot of
exist?
people don't even know. And for me, like the biggest change that I see, which just makes, being a startup, investing in startups so fun, is that now you've seen such a leveling of the playing field. And what I mean by that is all these tech advancements. Now we have cloud platforms, we have digital platforms, we have mobile, we have Wi-Fi, we have really all of these tools that actually make the cost a fraction of what it once was, but then also have increased the speed. When I think about how long it would take us to do things back then, and we were moving pretty quickly. And now, what would take weeks, really now you can do in minutes. So that's, so the importance of niche markets are actually today's niche market is tomorrow's emerging huge, blockbuster market.
Right. I mean, scaling a business in the age of folks questioning whether the internet would work, right? Like we've all, especially in like Web3 days now, we're all kind of liking it back to the internet and, seeing those old headlines. I mean, did you see headlines like that in the news at the time and go like, oh crap, what am I doing? Or like,
can I tell you, we'd have to do it offline. I could tell you stories when things went down and it was like, don't look behind the curtain. Really don't look behind the curtain. Yeah, no, I remember when, I do remember when sites used to go down quite often and things didn't work and we broke software because, in a way, the businesses back then, really, we were pioneers, if you will. It was just early. And anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so cool to have that experience and then to see, fast forward to today and you having that knowledge and background, right, to be able to put that to the startups that you invest in today. Super lucky. I'm excited to dive more into that. But like between the adrenaline rush and uncertainty of startup life and the confidence and almost pressure of maintaining a $1 billion business or multi-billion-dollar business,
yeah,
which is harder and why? And maybe which one makes you like more excited?
Well, I bet you can figure out which one makes me more excited. But you know what? No, in fairness, they're both really different. And I'm going to use a boat analogy. The bigger company, running a big division, running a big, publicly traded company, that's like running that's like driving a tanker, right? And the startup is more like a speedboat. But see, running a big division or running, a company as a CEO, a big company, multi-billion dollar, just it requires so much time for administration and gaining alignment of various constituencies across the matrix. And I say the matrix because truly in a multi-channel global environment, that's the way business gets done. There has to be checks and balances, right? And you have to be an enterprise thinker, and you have to be comfortable giving up speed for alignment, for risk management, and for consensus, for gaining consensus. In the startup world, which is more like the speedboat, right? Really, like for me, I spend my time, I joke, I'm chief cook and bottle washer. I do whatever needs doing. And so on that end, I spend a lot of time evaluating startups, looking at opportunities, looking at teams, a lot of time trying to assess the team and really determine their capability set and whether or not they really have what it takes to persevere, to to think on their feet and to pivot. I mean, everybody has to have mastered the art of the pivot, right? And that's actually the case too in a big company. You have to be able to do the pivot. You have more time to do the pivot in the big company.
Okay.
In the small company, you got to be able to move quickly.
Yeah.
But so I spent a lot of time doing that. And then, of course, fundraising, right? That takes a lot of time and is critical. Not something I'd ever done before, but I've actually gotten pretty good at. So, I guess for me personally, I actually think running the startup is easier. But I think that because of the experience I had previously launching, scaling, and growing these other businesses, because if I hadn't actually done that, the startup, being a startup, investing in startups would be really hard because so much of it is really your experience being able to read and assess people and situations and just sort of having a mental model for how you can determine whether or not, you can run all the numbers you want, but you really have to be able to determine whether or not you're going to be able to produce the kind of return that a venture capital firm is expected to produce for their investors. So anyway, so that's where I come out on it.
Yeah, it seems like there's like more of a initial like human element, right, to the startup side, because you do have to kind of nurture those teams first in order to help them grow. But so interesting to have had kind of the flip-flop experience, right? Like, okay, being able to scale big businesses helped me understand like the groundwork for helping a startup.
Right.
That's pretty unique.
Well, remember, I also was very fortunate for me, even though I was in some really big companies and I did run multi-billion-dollar P&Ls several times. There were several key experiences I had where I had to launch something new and grow it. So I didn't mention, like, for example, even at Staples, we grew Staples.com in the US, and then I got asked to go launch Staples.com internationally. So I got to do it all over again, in languages I couldn't even speak, which was very interesting. But my point is, once you've gone through the gamut of the life cycle, startup to growth to more mature, once you've gone through that, you get a real appreciation for the resources and the capability sets that are needed during those different phases. And a lot of that has just never left me. And I also have to say, I'm very fortunate that the years I spent at Fidelity is a phenomenal place when it comes to problem solving and just sort of being able to very succinctly and systematically size up a problem or an opportunity so that you can figure out how to capitalize on it. And so, I was very fortunate. I feel like I left Fidelity, then going to TIAA with a really excellent framework and experience as well doing it that I still use today. I mean, I still really do leverage a lot of the tools, if you will, that I learned, over the last 25 years to help me kind of suss out, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah. And I'm excited to get into 1414 Ventures and learn more about how you kind of bring all of that background and those values into this. So, will you explain more about why 1414 Ventures focuses on digital identity and the type of companies you're interested in investing in?
Sure, sure. So real quick, I'm just going to start with a quick definition of digital identity because
Yes.
not everyone knows what it is. So the way we define digital identity is really it's the high value transactional data or credentials that get captured, shared, and stored to either identify, authenticate, or authorize a transaction or interaction. The way we define the market, it really sits at the nexus of payments. So, if you were to draw like 4 circles, there's payments, there's cybersecurity, there's e-commerce, and there's marketing. And so digital identity is kind of like right in that sweet spot amongst all 4 of those. And really at the end of the day, like it's all about the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we started looking at this back in 2019. Really 20 was when we began the quest to start the fund, had our first close late 20, and then, 21 pretty much finished the rest of the fundraising and then began investing. But over that time frame, the acceleration of all things digital just took off. Like that had been the case before the pandemic, but I feel like the pandemic lit a fire, lit a fire on everyone and, and really accelerated all of that. And so the need for better platforms and technology to support these new contactless virtualized business models became even more critical. So I have to say, looking back in retrospect, our timing is really quite good in that regard. For me, the opportunity really boiled down to a few things. First, the size of the market. We actually have a matrix where we sized the market, and according to our definition, it's $612 billion. We've got 50 subsegments. In fact, Nicole, I think since I last spoke to you, we added a new subsegment. We were at 49. Now we're at 50.
Hey.
we added data privacy, which is a really big area. And then I'd say the other 2 big items that really drove my decisioning for 1414 was my own personal passion. As I mentioned, I love building, I love creating and launching new products, new platforms. I love partnering and helping people. So I was excited about the impact we could have. And then finally, third, I would say, is our model. What I really like about our model is it's really got 2 components. So because we're investing so early stage, pre-seed and seed, we really entered into this saying, capital is a commodity. The best way to really help these companies is to provide capital, but also hands-on expertise. Mm-hmm. And hands-on expertise is everything from mentorship, collaboration to, really just providing operational know-how, if you will, to help these companies improve their growth trajectory. And so for us, we've made 6 investments thus far, and they really run the gamut of digital identity. So I would say, no surprise, some are in areas of what I would call device intelligence and IoT. Others are in the areas of authentication, which is super critical in fintech and financial services more broadly. Identity access management. There's a really cool company that we invested in that is actually in that space and has a really great platform that's really suited for the return to work. Ooh. And for helping the hybrid work environment. And then, of course, digital wallets and data privacy and security. Those are also areas we really like, and companies. We have companies in our portfolio that are leveraging technologies related to that.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, from seeing Web 1.0 to all the way to Web 3 and being a part of the whole ride and helping startups and companies all in between that grow and scale. I'm so excited to ask you more about that. But I do want to first ask about digital identity. And basically what you're saying is digital identity and the data underneath that is the linchpin of how businesses happen. And it's so funny because it's something that, we like use every single day that we maybe don't even realize, right? And that's kind of something that
That's right.
is so interesting to even fintech, right? Like I have friends that are like, fintech, what's that you do there, Nicole? And I'm like, well, let me show you your phone. Can I see your phone, please? And I'll like say that app is fintech and you use fintech.
Right.
Like, and it's so crazy, like how people don't always, connect the dots with what's going on just in all of their technologies. But anyway, but I do want to ask about some of the key areas you're interested for that next wave of innovation in this space. Are we moving beyond just like facial recognition type digital identities? What is kind of, I guess, for a lack of a better word, your crystal ball showing you?
Right. Well, so yes, I mean, biometrics is amazing, of course, but it's so funny. There was a company we looked at very recently in the psychometrics space, so which is beyond just like your behaviors. It gets to your intent, like how you're wired to do what you're doing and your propensity. So anyway, there's some really cool things, but I would say that, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with bringing up Web 3.0, right? I think Web 3.0, this whole idea of greater decentralization and, being able to provide even more transparency, and at the same time, being able to take data. We have to start talking about data beyond big data.
Mm-hmm.
We're probably at least at, big data 3.0 as well, right? I mean, being able to take big data and AI and machine learning and being able to now deploy that in ways to basically, I'm all about like leveling the playing field, right? Like giving people access to services and to products that can improve their standard of living, right? And so I'll just give you one little example of a company we recently invested in that I love because it's where digital identity and fintech meet.
Ooh,
So
yeah.
there's a company we invested in Colombia that actually uses identity graphs instead of FICA scores, typical credit underwriting, because the data is not good in that country to do that. And the whole objective here is because, in that particular country, 97% of the people don't have access to loans, to lending. And so by the platform that this company's created basically allows people through their employer, so it's lending as a benefit, to get access to capital so that they can buy really basic things. And so their standard of living goes up. They also get access to financial education and financial literacy as a result of this process. And, it's a win-win. So I mentioned that one because it's a great example of digital identity, fintech intersection, but then also the power of, helping people and raising access for everyone and making money at the same time too. Mm-hmm. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. Well, and it's like one of my North Stars, I guess I have multiple North Stars, but one of the main thesis of what the fintech and what I'm doing with the brand is to say, hey, like we have the maturing technology for everyone to win. So why aren't we using it and placing it in where it needs, right? So, and I think
That's
internationally, that is such a critical component of that. we don't always realize here in the US how fortunate we are to have so much financial services at our fingertips, because that is not what is happening, across waters. And so I love that you're identifying that and you leveraging, the work that you do to help with that. And I love that you bring that example up, because it's, one, it's great to just have an example of how, what you're doing and digital identity is incorporated into, decentralization and the Web3 aspect of it. But yeah, to give like a tangible action item to this is, I think, so critical. And I think the audience is really going to resonate with that, because it's why we're all here in fintech, right? Is to like help, is to level that playing field, to make things better for everyone. And why not, when we literally have like the most vast technology than we ever had before, to make it happen?
That's absolutely right. And to your point, if we didn't have the technology that we have today, there's no way I would even be able to make an investment in a company, not here in the United States, right? It would be cost prohibitive. But what's so great about, the technologies we have now is that you really can conduct the due diligence and do all the things you need to do remotely, the way you and I are speaking now. And that, in a sense, levels the playing field, because there's much greater access to capital that, people previously wouldn't have had access to, because it would have been too hard just logistically to even meet up with them. So it's great that our norms are changing and that behaviors are changing and that technology is helping to enable this.
Right, exactly. And I mean, is the incorporation of, I imagine that the incorporation of like blockchain is a huge player in this, right?
It's funny. I moderated a panel for Boston's FinTech Week on decentralized finance, right? DeFi. I just wanted to say that because I wasn't sure everybody knows what DeFi is. But it was really cool because I look at a lot of blockchain companies. There are several that we're evaluating right now, in fact. And but even at that panel that I led the discussion on, we had both companies, really cool companies. One is blockchain based in healthcare. They're using blockchain to basically wring out the cost in healthcare related to multiple records for one individual, right? So think about that use case. Very easy to understand. I know it is hard to do, but they're doing it. So that's really cool. And then the other one, the other blockchain example was the insurance claims, and being able to use blockchain to speed up the processing of insurance claims. And, to me, that's like a perfect use case. And so to me, like with blockchain, I really think, we're beyond the phase of, oh, this is sort of interesting. Now it's really about adoption and applying the technology to the right use cases. Because, there definitely are some use cases where I think it wouldn't be a perfect fit, but there are many use cases where the transparency, the distributed ledger, the trust, if you will, and then the speed part, and just eliminating the middleman. Like there are just so many cases that you can look at where it's the perfect use case for disruption, but it delivers increased transparency, speed, and efficiency.
And I love that you used an example like healthcare, because there are the communication factor is what can be challenging with blockchain and moving forward with actual adoption of it, right? Or like seeing mass adoption. We have to, and this is the same for cryptocurrencies, and just that using that more as opposed to fiat currency. We have to get to the point where we're expressing to the mass audience, so the everyday consumer, these very real use cases that will actually impact them every day, and it not seeming like something that is only for a certain group of people, or people that only understand it, or people that are rich or whatever. Like, I think there's just so much stigma around blockchain and the future of what it can really do to help. So to like communicate those very real everyday use cases is just so important. And so, yeah, I love that you did that. But yeah, I also want to talk a little bit about your SPAC, or Special Purpose Acquisition Company, Everest Consolidator Acquisition Corp, which is focused on investing in the wealth management space. Very cool. I actually think the wealth management space does have a lot to do with the that mass adoption of blockchain and Web3. But anyways, out of all the industries you could have focused on with the SPAC, what was it about the wealth management and the future of innovation that led you toward that industry?
No, it's a great question. So I'll hit on a couple of points because these might be facts that people know, but are really good to keep these front and center. So frankly, I'd say the demographic trends and the money in motion is a huge opportunity. So what I mean by that is, we're living right now during what people have termed the great wealth transfer, right? So there's 70 trillion in assets that are moving from one generation to the next. And the money in motion makes a huge opportunity for different constituencies in the marketplace because it's been proven. And I'm so lucky. I was at Fidelity when we were doing some of this work. Typically, about 2/3 of the people who end up inheriting the wealth, they change advisors, or they change investment managers. And so that creates an opportunity for other segments of the market, right? And so for me, the particular segment that I think has tremendous opportunity are these next generation platforms. Exactly what you've been talking about, these digital advice, tech-enabled platforms that really enable people to interact digitally, that actually make advisors, if there's an advisor in the relationship, much more efficient, much more scalable, giving them the tools to basically meet people where they are, right? Let them interact the way they want to interact. And so that's very exciting to me. I think that segment is really well positioned while this money in motion is sort of up for grabs, if you will. And then finally, as part of that, tech is also enabling the evolution of advice and planning. And, that's near and dear to my heart because I was actually at Fidelity and worked on the launch of the first retirement income planning tool quite a while ago. I think it was 15 years ago at this point. And it's amazing to me to see how far everything has come from, that Web 1.0 version of it, if you will, right? Now, things are just so much more usable, just much more frictionless. And, it's exciting because there's an opportunity to, really get behind some of these emerging and more well-established platforms and kind of put the pieces together to really make something that would be very compelling to this next generation of investors. And then finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention ESG. I feel like people now, I have always felt this way, but there really wasn't a language or a vernacular for it. And now I feel like we're getting the language for this. And what I mean by that is, in the early days, investors were really focused on the value of their portfolio. And now it's not, yes, the value of the portfolio matters, but really what matters is how your values are driving the impact of that portfolio. And so I think it's an exciting time. We're probably in the first inning of how ESG will get operationalized into the end-to-end advice and planning process. And so that's very exciting to me. And being able to be a player in this, helping to create you know, a company or help to create a situation that really does enable people to have their needs met is exciting to me.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like hitting the nail on the head. And it's why I cater so much of my content as well to the wealth tech space and wealth management, because even though a sliver of what fintech does, I do think it's the sliver that has one of the most, one of the biggest rooms to grow. There's so much white space left in wealth management that fintech hasn't even touched yet. And I think that investors like yourself and others out there are kind of, just now getting, right? We're in that first inning. And, of course you have to mention ESG, because if we're focusing on that next generation that is inheriting wealth, that is what they care about. Like, gone are the days of like, are you a good stock picker, financial advisor or robo advisor, or are you, what is my return? It's more about how are you allocating certain aspects of my portfolio so that it is representative of me, or investing in companies that I believe in. And that just like changes everything, right? It changes like the value proposition of a financial planner, of a financial advisor. It changes that relationship between, the app or that robo advisor or whatever it is. And it's completely influential. And it's actually like the grounds that I'll go out and speak to on helping wealth managers or financial advisors kind of understand how to build their tech stack or understand the changing terrain and why they have to pay so much attention to fintech. And that is one of like the core aspects of it. So I love that we're aligned. I feel very validated because of that. So I'm glad the knowledge I've been spitting out there is on point with you, because I mean, it's like, how can we not just be thinking about this all the time? This is literally the future. Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And so when it comes to like the sections of wealth management that make you the most excited, I mean, is that like, is kind of helping ESG scale? Is that what maybe makes you the most excited? And I guess, how do we kind of keep seeing that play out? Because I guess right now ESG still feels like something special, right? Or like almost like still feels like a niche, when really I think
I was just going to say, using one of your words, it still feels like a niche, but I think it's an emerging segment. I have no doubt it'll be big. I mean, I get excited. I mean, I get excited about financial planning and advice, digital advice specifically. Financial literacy is also something that means a lot to me. I've, there have been plenty of times where I've, tried to help next generation people, really understand the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s of not even investing, just saving, and how to think about, managing your money. So financial literacy is big. And then, of course, tools. I feel like you've got to have tools available for people, right? And it's never a one size fits all. Some people will want to read a book. Some people will want to have a little widget to play with. Other people, want to be able to listen to a webcast or a podcast, or, they'll want to listen in on something and kind of take it in small consumable bites. Others, they're happy to go read a book that'll take, 8 hours. So it's whatever the tools are, it's, you got to meet people where they are. So that's what's exciting to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that gives a sense of like the kind of companies in the wealth management and wealth tech space that you'd be interested in, right? Like ones that can kind of scale those tools in a way to almost help with that, more mass adoption. Because obviously we've seen, and another reason why wealth management and the wealth tech space is so exciting is because of just the shift that we've seen because of the pandemic. People are finally interested in managing their money. And now they're like, okay, where are these tools? Like, how can I actually do this? And so, what room for, more emerging fintechs to come in and say, here is some real ways to do it. And I think some of like the banking apps are trying to work on it, but I think there's still just so much room for maybe a startup to maybe one that Jackie finds to be able to
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you're right. The big thing with the pandemic is it kind of cemented the shift to digital first, right? Like it's gotta be, no matter what business you're in, even if you have brick and mortar, you got to lead digitally, because right now people just aren't, going out to meet with people in person. I mean, very to the extent they did previously. But yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to see the kind of companies that you invest in and to see the kind that you help grow and scale. I'm sure we'll all be hearing about them in the near future. But talking a little bit about inclusion here at What the Fintech, because we love that. And it is so critical to the success of the future of fintech. You spend a lot of time mentoring as well, which is so important to bringing more women and different kinds of people into the fintech and VC space. Will you share maybe a memorable moment or story that was rewarding when mentoring folks?
Well, it's funny. So I should also just mention, I also do angel investing too. So personally, outside of the fund, and that is where I do a lot of my own personal fintech investing on my own, because the fund is, oriented towards digital identity. But to your point around, mentoring and a fun moment, I just, I have many moments, but I have to say one thing that I really miss. I am fortunate in that I belong to a few different organizations where they, they really walk the talk in terms of sort of paying it forward and helping the next generation. And so one of the organizations actually hosts annually an event called Women Opening Doors for Women. Oh. And it's the International Women's Forum, which I'm a part of. And it's a great event because I typically invite 3 to 5 of my mentees, and all the other people invite 3 to 5 of their mentees. And you get everybody together, and it's sort of cross-pollination. But the moment that I really miss is when we're all together. I have pictures of these previous events, and it's fun to look back at the pictures and kind of remember when we could, do these things in person. So I think for me, it really is, the memorable moment, if you will, is probably when we were all at the table having dinner and, sort of doing our cross-pollination thing, but we were in the same physical room. That's kind of what I miss.
Well, and just to see a room filled or a table filled of women, right? I mean, that is rare in our space. The amount of conferences, more so in my, when I first started out in my career, that I would attend. And I remember like one of the first times I ever went to like an executive meeting, and I was so excited. I was like, oh, sweet, I got invited to the executive meeting. And I sat at just whatever the first open table, and the big speech was happening, and I like looked around and I was like, oh man, wait a minute. I was like, where are the women? And I literally am just like one of the only ones. I like stuck out like a sore thumb. And then, and there's I have photos of it too from when the photographer at the event was running around, and I'm just like, oof, those photos are a little rough. But fast forward, to today, and we're seeing some change. So, and seeing more women involved. And, a lot of that does have to do with the work that you're doing, right? And that's super critical to moving that needle on the rather disappointing stats around women that receive VC funding. So talk to us a little bit about how the companies you're involved with are helping get more money into the hands of female founders and have more women in the venture capital decision-making process.
No, it's great. It's a great question. And I mean, the numbers are I think in 2021, we still haven't seen the final, but I think the numbers are a little bit better, but they were so bad to begin with when it's like 2.5%. It's like a rounding error. But so two things. So first of all, even at 1414, we have 4 general partners. One of the other general partners is a woman. So woohoo, like 50% of our little group are women, which is great. So that's one thing. One of my mentees is actually an intern at 1414. She's a junior in college. So I'm getting them young so I can teach them the ropes so that they can go off and, be a future badass. And then, as I mentioned, it's really funny. I was thinking about this. A lot of the angel investments I do are in women-led businesses, and they do happen to be, fintech. Not all fintech, but a lot of them are either fintech or renewable, climate-oriented.
Awesome.
Areas where I feel there are big honking problems, and it'll take a woman to figure it out, right? So that's part of it. And then, of course, it's interesting. What I've noticed since we've had our fund, we definitely, it's true, like we attract more, I think, startups where women are either the founder or a co-founder. And so, we're actively looking. There are businesses under consideration, right now that are female led. So, which is great. So I'm sure that, part of our portfolio will include some businesses where women are investors, are the founders. Sorry. And so it's exciting to me, like that's how I'm thinking about it. And I also just think like really, helping to support however it is, whether it's through angel investing or whether it's through the fund or, whether it's through some of the things we've started to do or we've started to sponsor, some pitch competitions. Those are all avenues to help cultivate. It's really around explaining how this whole thing works, whether it's venture capital or fintech. And then it's explaining, why you can be successful. Sort of, as we've been talking, it's all about removing barriers, providing access, and providing transparency.
Exactly. Beautiful, beautiful way to wrap up our conversation. I love that. And thank you so much for the work you're doing because it is so important. Thank you so much, Jackie, for joining me. I do want to just get your final thoughts. The last question I like to ask my guests to wrap it up. Please tell us what the F we can expect from you and 1414 next.
Wow. Well, let's see. What the F? Well, I would say that I think you can expect us to be backing some of these next generation platforms. Personally, I hate passwords, so I'm hoping that maybe we'll ignite the match that once and for all eliminates passwords and just makes interacting digitally that much easier, more secure, and better. So we'll see. What the F, right?
Yes. I love it. That was such a great answer. Thank you again, Jackie, for joining us. That is a wrap on this episode of What the Fintech. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If you loved this episode, be sure to hit that subscribe button. You can find me on all your favorite podcast platforms. Until next time, talk to you soon.